Hello, and welcome to the next edition of our Empowering Women in Real Estate educational series, Scripts for Challenging Situations. I'm Karen Cooper. I'm the founder of Empowering Women in Real Estate, and I am really excited to bring this specific course to you because one of the things that I have learned throughout my career, I've been in business now for over 19 years, is sometimes we struggle to know the right words to say. And while there are no 2 days that are the same in real estate, things are constantly evolving and things are constantly changing. There are certain kind of objections or struggles that we tend to deal with on a consistent basis. And so having some words to say, I kind of hesitate sometimes in calling them scripts, it's actually really extremely helpful when it just comes to increasing your confidence and knowing how to address objections. So what I have put together for you through this course is not only some how-tos and some tips for utilizing scripts and how to implement these things in your business, but I have a series of scenarios and I have a series of questions that like a client, a buyer, or a seller would ask you. And some of these are ones from my own personal experience, from my own work with my team, the things that I tend to get asked repeatedly again and again. But also some of these are coming directly from our Empowering Women in Real Estate group members. I asked the group for some questions, some scenarios that they tend to struggle with, and I was able to incorporate a lot of those here. So let's just jump right in and get started. So here's the thing that I want you to keep in mind, kind of some how-tos as you're going through this course is, real life doesn't usually lend itself to a script, if you will. When I think of a script, we've all had this. You get the call from the telemarketer and you ask a question and they're reading from a script, and that script doesn't lend itself well to an actual conversation. It doesn't lend itself to something that kind of varies from their script. But the reality is our real life, especially our real estate businesses, vary off the script all the time, and everything is different constantly. So I think the thing that I want you to think about when you are utilizing this program, this course, these words, is think of this more as words to say, or verbiage that you can then use and tailor to your own specific needs and your own scenarios. But some of the things I'm going to share with you are things that I have used again and again and again and again in many different situations. Personally, I've helped well over 700 families in my real estate career. And some of the things I'm going to share with you, I've literally used or said hundreds of times. And obviously those were not the same situation every single time. So you're able to kind of mold this into a way that makes sense for you. So something that I recommend for you as you're going through this course is I recommend that you maybe either, if you can't copy and paste, maybe you will maybe type out or write out some of the scripts or the words to say that really resonate with you the most. And something that I like to do is I use the Notes app on my phone. I use it a ton. And I've used something similar to that really ever since I started in my real estate career, where I keep, it's like, what I have always called it is I've called it quick information. So the things that I would need to reference or to know regularly or want to remember, put it there. So it's something that you can kind of read back occasionally, kind of from time to time, just to kind of help to sort of make it part of kind of what you do in your business. Something else that you can do, and this is something that I do all the time. Here's an example. I have a sticky note on my computer that says friendly but consistent. Because what I have learned and what I would like for you to try is maybe you just start with take one of these scripts or one of these, sets of words to say, write it out in a way that makes sense to you and put it somewhere that you're going to see it on a regular basis. So what is something that you think that you're going to use the most, that you're going to use again and again, or maybe something that's really pertinent to what you're experiencing in your business right now, and keep it in front of you. I almost at any given time have a sticky note like that that's on my computer to monitor. I have them on the wall at my office. That is just something that I want to kind of be reminded of. And I keep it there until it's kind of become part of my dialogues and just kind of part of what I think of to say. And so that's something that I would like for you to do as well. And then just a couple of tips, kind of just some general tips when it comes to communication, because that's really what we're talking about here. When we're talking about scripts, we're talking about words to say, is we're talking about how you're communicating with your clients, is here's just kind of some general tips to use. So one of them, and honestly, if you take nothing else away from this course, this right here is this little set of tips right here. It's really the most important. And so the first one is listen. Actually listen. Really listen to what your clients are saying. Listen to what you are being told and ask questions. Come at it from a place of curiosity. I think so often, and especially, I mean, really, the longer you're in business, I think we can get a little jaded on this. So often we jump to conclusions and we think we know why they're asking the question that they're asking. You know, something that I hear a lot is we, you know, when they ask for a discounted commission, well, we think they're asking us, this is something I've talked to some of my team members before, we think they're asking us because they're considering using a specific company that's known for discounting, and that they must be interviewing those people, and that's why they're asking us. Well, maybe not. Maybe they're just asking just because they want to ask. And so the more you can ask questions and really come at it from a place of curiosity, the better you can understand where that question and where that objection is coming from, because more than you know, it is for a different reason than what you think. And the better you can understand, the better you can handle that. Something else that I will share with you, and this is a lesson that my dear friend Jeannie Cooper shared with me many years ago. And she said, he or she who speaks first loses. And basically what that means is sometimes you can talk yourself out of things. You know, when you get an objection from a buyer or from a seller, and you know, maybe you ask them a follow-up question, or you provide your sort of, you know, your retort or your response to whatever they've said. When there's a pause, those pauses are awkward and those pauses are uncomfortable. And I think sometimes we have this urge or this need to fill the air because, oh my gosh, this is so strange, nobody's talking, when really they're just thinking and they're absorbing what you've said. And so resist that urge to fill the air, because when you don't, you can actually kind of talk yourself out of whatever it was that was happening. And then try not to over explain. And I just see that that's completely spelled wrong. Don't to over explain. Try not to over explain, because again, you can really over explain and talk someone completely out of whatever it is. The fewer, more clear and concise words that you can use to answer questions, to explain the contract, really the better. More words are not helpful. Clear, concise, that's really what's going to help you. And then one of my favorite tips, and this is something that I have used for years, and anyone can use this, is to support your responses with stories. Stories that are from yourself, or stories that are from your team members, if you're on the team, or your colleagues from within your brokerage, because people are more likely to remember a story. They are less likely for you to, when you kind of spew out facts and, you know, this is why staging is so important to listing your home, because X percentage of homes sell for X percentage more when they have been staged. Well, that's not very memorable or very interesting. But when you say, you know, a couple of years back, I had this client and their home was kind of similar to yours, and we did some staging, and you know, these are the results that we got. Like, that's a real life story. They're going to remember that, and that's far more interesting. And so those stories are so powerful. And so it's so important to connect with other agents, connecting with agents in our Empowering Women in Real Estate group, connecting with agents in your brokerage, in your office, because the more you can learn these stories, it kind of gives you kind of some fuel as you're going through and handling objections. So that's really good. So, all right, so let's get started. So the first scenario, so imagine the scenario. Your client wants to do something that's really kind of unadvisable. So your client is asking, either you're in negotiations, or it's time to submit an offer, and what they're wanting to do is really not something that you recommend based on your experience and your knowledge and what have you. So this script is one that I have used. It's probably the thing that I have said the most over the last 19 years. And it is some version of, I understand. And I'm going to support your decision and I'm going to push as hard as I possibly can to make this happen for you. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I don't suggest to you this. Some version of, I hear you. I'm going to do everything I can to get that for you. But I really wouldn't be doing my job and representing you well if I didn't share with you that actually this is what I think would be better. And here's why. Some version of that, I have used that again and again and again. And what is the goal of that script? The goal is to get your point across to the client and to express really what is your best professional advice to them about what they should do, but to do so in a way that helps them to still feel like you support them. Because, and if you've been around for a while, you've probably had this experience where, the client can turn on us, right? It has happened to all of us. You get into a heated negotiation and something happens and you're trying to, you don't necessarily agree what they think they should do or how they think they respond. It's not what your experience or your professionalism tells you that they should do. And when you try to direct them in the way that you think is most appropriate, they actually suddenly feel like you're the enemy and that you don't have their best interest at heart and you must represent the seller and, in all of these different things. And so finding a way to help them to feel that you support them, you are going to do what they want. This is their decision to make, but knowing that still, I need you to understand this. This is what my experience tells me, and I need to let you know that I still support you, and I'm going to 100%. If this is the decision that you've made, and this is how you want to go about it, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to push that for you. But please know, I want you to understand this as well. And often, I have found that when I share that, and when I share in this way with the client, often they're able to sort of, like, the guard comes down a little bit and they're able to kind of listen a little bit more subjectively or objectively to what I'm sharing. And often we're able to kind of come to terms with what's the right way to handle a particular situation. So that's one of my favorite scripts. If there's one that you want to kind of start with, mold those words to a way that makes sense to you. But it is probably one of my most used ever. All right, next scenario. Oh, this is a tough one. And I'll be honest, this is actually the scenario that inspired this course because I just went through a very similar situation myself. And I was talking to one of my mentors and she said, this would make a great topic for your next course. So here we are. And that is, how do you let go of a toxic client, or how do you let go of a client who's they're just really not a good fit for you? So these are the words that I would say. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to work with you. I wish you the very best with your home search. Period. You don't need to over elaborate or over explain. A lot of times they won't even respond to you. And if they do, you can just kind of reiterate, I'm just really sorry. Right now my client load is too full. And unfortunately I just can't, I'm just not able to work with you. It's not worth, particularly for the toxic type clients. It is, and you know who they are when you've been working with them. It is not worth trying to explain and tell them how horrible they are, and that's why you're not going to work with them. It's really not worth it. It's not worth the energy. It's not, you need to get away from the negative energy and get over to the positive energy as quickly as possible, and trying to convince them of why they've been so horrible to you and that's why you can't work with them anymore is not going to help. So I'm not going to be able to work with you, or I'm not going to be able to continue to work with you. I wish you the best of luck with your sale or with your home search. Very simple, and you really don't need to elaborate beyond that. Now, if this is not one of those kind of toxic type scenarios, maybe they're not a good fit for you because they call at the last minute every day and want to go see a house, and the area where they're looking is an hour away from your home. Well, that's probably not a great client for you to work with, because how in the world can you juggle that with a full client load? Maybe if you're brand new, and certainly I did a lot of this when I was brand new, then you have the time and the bandwidth to do that. but a lot of people can't, and it's just not the best use of your time. Maybe you don't understand that area. They're looking in an area that's just not an area that you specialize in. Maybe it's not a type of property. Maybe they're looking at rural property and you're not used to that type of property. You don't feel comfortable with that. So you can add on to, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to continue to work with you. I'm not going to be able to help you. But here's what I'd like to do. I would like to introduce you to my colleague, and she really specializes in this type of home that you're looking for, or she really specializes in this particular neighborhood, in the neighborhood where your home is located. And I know that she would take great care of you. And so the goal of this whole thing here is to exit professionally and gracefully, because it's a small world, whether you know it or not. And what you don't want is, you don't want a reputation of being difficult to work with. And you don't want that. You always want to handle people professionally and gracefully, even when they don't always treat you that way. And so this allows you to do that professionally and gracefully, yet firmly. And in the situation where you are able to refer them out to a colleague, well, you're able to ensure that that client is still well taken care of through a connection by you. And, I would ask that agent for a referral fee. So really, it's a win-win all the way around. And you can trust that this client is really well taken care of. They're going to be so happy that you have connected with them with a wonderful professional who really is experienced and knowledgeable in what they're looking for, or in the area that they're looking for. And so everybody's going to be happy. And so that's really the best way that you want to handle that. Next scenario, and this is a rough one right now. My team, I have a team of 35 women, 35 amazing women, by the way. And we are located in Northern Virginia. So we kind of serve that whole DC metro area. And our market right now is insane. And I know a lot of areas around us are the same. We really serve, kind of the Washington, DC, Virginia, Maryland, even West Virginia areas. All the markets around us are this way. And I know that a lot of markets across the country are this way too, just from the posts that we're seeing in the group. And so we're seeing this a lot. It is a super hot seller's market. There is not enough inventory. And a very real scenario that a lot of us are experiencing right now is having a seller who wants to upgrade. They want to take advantage of the increased market values. They want to upgrade their home, but they're really afraid that they're not going to be able to find a home to buy, or even a home to rent. I mean, right now in our market, we're even seeing like 30 rental applications sight unseen on rentals. So it's really tough and it's really difficult. So what do you do when you have that scenario? So this is less about a script, and it's more about certain action items and things that you do. So this is a very real possibility depending on where you're located. The first thing that I would do, and I think this is something that a lot of us really don't think about, is you need to explore the financial options for buying before selling. And I think this is something, and even myself as a 19-year veteran, we had a training recently for my team with our preferred lender, and she went through 5 or 6 different options that I hadn't even thought of. I mean, if you've been around for a while, you might think of or remember the old bridge loans that we used to do, which was really kind of a very short-term, kind of almost risky situation. But there's actually a lot more options beyond that. And so what I would suggest is getting your client with your lending partner and really talk through what are those financial options. And those financial options don't necessarily mean that they're making 2 payments, but find out what those options are, because they may have some choices, and those choices are going to be easier, possibly, than the alternative, which we'll get to next. So I would go through that first. And then the next thing is, you really want to help them to talk through, walk through, think through all of the options in a very worst case scenario first. The time to have this conversation is not when their home is on the market and they have 100 showings scheduled and you've already gotten 15 sight unseen offers. That is not the time. It is too late. You need to have this conversation before they go on the market. And so if their home sells and there is nothing for them to buy, or there's nothing for them to rent, what are some of the possible solutions? And this will vary based on your market and where you're located. What are some of the solutions? Is it apartment complexes? Are there apartment complexes where they can rent? In my area, there are some that will do a short-term rental or a month-to-month type rental. They tend to be pricey. It does mean a second move. You're probably going to have to get a storage unit because you're not going to be able to fit your whole house into the apartment. But that could be an option. Do they have vacancies? Do they take pets? What about long-term or extended stay type hotels? And we actually have a couple of those options in my area. Nice one-bedroom units with a kitchen. May not work so well with a family with 4 kids and 3 dogs, but for a couple or a family with 1 child, that might work out. And so that could be a solution. Look into that. Again, going to be a little bit more on the expensive side, but might be worth it to net the large gain on the sale of their home right now. Could they move in with family? I don't think anybody likes that option, but it may very well be an option. They can save money, they could put their things in storage, and that's going to give them extreme flexibility when it comes to purchasing. So is that even an option for them? And of course, they're going to need to talk to the family members for whom that could work. Could they temporarily, so think about this, right now we're in the age still of the coronavirus, and lots of kids, my kids, are doing distance learning. Is it possible that they could temporarily move to another location, maybe at the beach or on the lake? Are there any vacation areas near you or within a few hours, especially if your clients are people who work from home exclusively? We have a ton of those around in my marketplace in my area. Could you rent something through Airbnb or through, VRBO, vacation rental by owner? Now that is probably not going to be financially feasible during like an on season or an in season type rental, which we are kind of coming into with like a spring and a summer months. But if you're talking about off season, if this market continues and you're coming into fall, you're coming into rental into winter, those areas you can rent much, much less expensively for a month-to-month type situation. So that could be an option. That could also be really fun. I mean, imagine, telling your family, hey, we're going to move to the beach for a couple months while we work on our homes. That could work. So think about that. And I think the thing to know is that none of these worst case scenario options are going to be ideal, and they're all going to have some discomfort involved. But knowing what they are and talking through them is going to do 2 things. One, it's going to enable them to have a plan in case they need it, because they might need it. And it's going to give them kind of a backup plan, which is going to give them some peace of mind. The other thing is it's going to really help them and you to assess sense of urgency and to assess motivation, because if they're willing to be uncomfortable for a bit to do some of these things if they had to, then that's going to help them to validate their decision to list their home right now. If they look at the worst case scenario or they explore the financial options, they go, no, none of those, I'm not willing to do any of those. Well, you know what? If you're not willing to do any of those, then maybe now is not the time, because we can't guarantee that we're going to find you something quickly. That's what I would do in this particular situation. The next scenario is, and again, similar market that we're in right now, is your buyers are really excited. They're so excited to buy, but they can't afford to go over appraisal with cash. That's something that we're seeing a lot in my market, and I know in a lot of markets around us. The buyers are waiving every single contingency. They're even waiving appraisal, which means you're going to have some cash on hand so that you can afford to pay whatever that difference is if in fact the home does not appraise. And a lot of these homes are selling well over list price. So what are you going to do? So if this is something that's happening in your market, the first thing that you really need to do, again, this is a little bit less about words to say and more about kind of action steps. And you notice, and I think what you're going to notice, sort of a similar thread that's running through a lot of these different scenarios or situations, is education. Because a lot of times these challenges or these objections or the things that you're dealing with, it's really coming from a place where the buyer or the seller just doesn't understand. And it's your job, part of our job is to educate them, to help them to understand this is what's happening in our market, or this is what's feasible. And so this is another one of those. And so really it's educating them about the current state of the market. You know what, right now, let's look historically. Instead of focusing on what's on the market right now, let's look back the last 30 days. Let's look at anything that would have been like what you would have wanted. You can do a search of homes that are similar to the criteria they're looking for in price range, and look at where they closed. Like, look at the price point of where they closed. And that's going to really help you to set those expectations and say, look, you know what? I know your budget's 400. I know we're looking at homes that are priced at 400,000. But if you look here at these homes that have closed in the last 45 days, they listed at 400, but they're closing at 450. Are you prepared? Are you able to do that? And what that might mean then is that might mean that they're going to have to adjust not only their expectations in terms of what they're looking for, but they're going to need to adjust and start looking at homes that are well below their comfort level or their qualification level. Because if 400 is their max and they're shopping for homes at 450, well, they're not going to get it because those are going at 450. If 400 is their max, then they should probably looking at homes at 350 because then they have a shot at getting it at 400. And so that's a difficult conversation to have. The more data that you can share, the more information you can provide, the easier it's going to be to help your buyer to see. And then find other ways in your offer that can help to make your offer more appealing to the buyer, even if maybe yours isn't the cleanest in terms of contingencies or isn't the highest price. And so what are some ways? One could be a free rent back. You know, one of the last scenario that we just had is you've got the seller who they have to sell their house, but they don't know where they're going to go yet. Well, imagine if you could get a free rent back for a month or, you know, maybe 2 months or whatever. That would give that seller some comfort to be able to move into whatever they need to do or to figure out where they're going to go. So that is actually worth quite a bit. Find out what are the seller's specific needs. You know, I am consistently blown away by how many buyer's agents just email offers over without having never spoken to or communicated with the listing agent. And when you do that, you really don't know what's important to the seller. You need to find out what's important to them. Is there something, and maybe it's something unusual, is there a specific need that they have that your buyer can fulfill that may not mean that you have the highest offer monetarily, but by being able to fulfill that need, it does provide there is some monetary value to it. And so find out what that is and see if there's something that you can do to make your offer more appealing and really kind of set your offer apart. The next scenario, whoops, I think I went the wrong way. Okay. So your buyer doesn't want to get pre-approved. So gosh, we've had this. If you've been around for a bit, you have probably had the situation where, you know, I just want to see this one house. I don't need to get, I just want to see this one, or, you know, I'm just window shopping. I'm just curious. I'm really just curious. So this goes back to kind of where we started with tips with ask more questions. Ask more questions. Why don't you want to get pre-approved? What's your concern? Are you in your mind? Are they just looking? Or is there a concern like, are they afraid that if they get pre-approved that suddenly their phone's going to ring off the hook by mortgage lenders who are calling them and trying to get their business? Or are they afraid that if they get pre-approved, it's going to lower their credit score? Like, find out really what it is. What is their objection? Really, why? Why is it that they don't want to get pre-approved? Do they have this misconception that they're going to have to gather together, you know, 2 years worth of documents and it's going to take 2 weeks, which, you know, in the real world now, that's not realistic anymore. It actually doesn't take that long, and you can actually get a pre-approval just kind of based on stated income in a lot of cases. And so there's very little information that they're going to have to gather to start this process. So find that out. And then some words to say, and I've got a couple of different options here for you. You know, the thing is, you might be just looking, but the other buyers who are out here viewing the same home are not. And if you don't take the time to be prepared before the showing, if you love it and you want to make an offer, it's going to be too late. So that's kind of one of the sort of key kind of scripts or words to say, particularly if you have buyers that say they're only interested in this one house. And especially in a market that's really competitive and aggressive, if they're not pre-approved before they go in, they're just literally not going to have enough time to get it together and get an offer submitted before the deadline. Another one is something that I've used a lot is I really don't want to set you up for failure. And the worst thing that I can do is to show you a home that you fall in love with, only to find out that it's not financially comfortable for you, because then nothing else will ever measure up. And you're going to be tempted to push your budget and make a poor financial decision because of it. You never want to say, it's not that you're not going to be able to afford this home, because the reality is a lot of people can qualify for a whole lot more than they're actually really comfortable in paying. And so you want to approach it from that perspective. I just think that that's a little bit more respectful way to handle it. And just basically saying like, look, if I take you here and you find out that you're not really comfortable with the payment, how disappointing is that going to be? And no other home is ever going to match up to this one. And then what you may find yourself wanting to do is stretching your budget to such a point that you're going to be uncomfortable every month just to try to make this work. And that's not going to be a good situation that you're going to be happy with long term. So just kind of getting that out. And then something else that I will say about this is to consider having a policy for these types of buyers. You know, maybe you offer sort of a one showing or a one showing day or a one experience, maybe 1 to 3 houses, and then you require that they get pre-approved in order to continue. Because here's why. Sometimes their reluctance is, it could be that they just don't want to waste their time getting pre-approved because, you know, if they don't really like this house or they don't like these options, then, you know, they're not really, you know, they are just kind of looking and they don't want to bother going through all this other stuff if they're really not going to like these things. But also they may not be sure about you. And so if you can kind of take a little bit of time, be upfront about it. You know, if they give you a lot of pushback, then you might consider, you know what, okay, I can set aside 1 hour for you on Saturday. The rest of my day is, you know, taken up by my pre-approved buyers. I can take an hour for you on Saturday and we can go out and we can look at these 2 homes. We can go out and look at this one home and let's just kind of get a feel for things. And so that's going to give you a chance to connect with them and hopefully earn their trust and demonstrate your knowledge, which then will hopefully help them to kind of get past that hurdle and then get pre-approved. I would really only do that one time. I wouldn't take them out again without having them go through the process. Okay, this is a rough one and kind of falls a line. This was a question submitted by the group, a scenario with what we're seeing in a lot of our markets is what happens when your buyer's offer wasn't accepted again? You know, sometimes it's a situation of the buyer, they're just not listening to you. You know, go back to that very first scenario and those words to say about, you know, I'm going to support you and I'm going to do exactly what you want. This is your decision. But by the way, I would be doing a great job for you if I didn't tell you that I don't think this is enough. I think you need to offer this. Like, go back to that. Sometimes it's something that they can affect. Sometimes it's not. Just the market is just too competitive. So you need to find out when your client is losing. You need to find out in as much detail as possible from the listing agent why their offer wasn't accepted, so you can relay it. You know, and it's not enough to say it wasn't high enough. You know, can you find out? Obviously, the listing agent can tell you exactly what it escalated for, exactly what the final cost was, but can they give you some sense it went over list price? There were multiple escalations, like something to try to help you. You know, the offer we accepted also waived all the contingencies, or it had a larger earnest money deposit, or, you know, what were the things, so that you can kind of relay that information. But I would also start to track that information, especially right now. It is rough out there for buyers agents. You know, I really feel for you. I'm seeing this on my team a lot, taking buyers out constantly, jumping through hoops constantly, writing, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 offers before they're getting a home because things are so competitive. So track what you submit, track the offers that you're submitting. You know, what was the list price? What did you offer? What were the terms? What did the listing agent say? And then what did it ultimately sell for? Because sometimes you could be going through this process for months before they actually find the right home, because then you start to have some data and then you can start sharing that data with your buyers. And I remember doing this one time myself with a buyer. It was a very different market than the one that we have right now. And I showed them something like 55 homes and they were struggling to come to terms with our market. It was good, obviously nothing like we have right now, but they were just really struggling and they were putting in low offers and they weren't listening. And so I kept track of every house I'd ever shown them. And so at one point, and this had gone on for months, I was able to go through and document, okay, you know what, we looked at this house on this date, you know, this is what we offered if we did, or this is what it was listed at, and this is what it closed for. We looked at this house, this is what it was listed at. So they were able to see, oh, okay, this is really what's happening. And very soon after, I think 1 or 2 houses after we had that conversation, we were able to get under contract. So having that data is really very, very helpful. And, you know, when it comes down to why are they losing, is there something that they can really do? Is it just a situation of they're not listening and, you know, they want to include all the inspections and they want to, they want to try to negotiate closing cost assistance, and what they're asking for is just really not competitive in this market? Or is it a situation where this market the competition level is so strong, they simply can't compete? They don't have enough cash to compete. They don't have the ability to waive enough contingencies to compete. They just can't do it. And so, kind of back to the scenario from a couple questions ago, is consider reducing the price point that they're searching in, or, as painful as this is to admit, they might need to just press pause for a bit, because if they are constantly losing out, the reality is eventually they're going to look at you and they're going to think that it's something that you're doing. You need to stay in touch, in communication as much as possible. And they might need to just kind of take a little breath, take a pause, let things kind of calm a bit, and then re-enter the market. Next, so this is something that I've heard many times over the years. We don't need a buyer's agent. We're only calling listing agents. Have you ever had this before? And really, again, what this boils down to is an education problem, because a lot of buyers have the misconception that if they don't have a buyer's agent, then they can negotiate away that co-op commission or that buyer's agent commission, or that it somehow otherwise defaults to them. And I don't know about you in the market that you're in, but definitely in my market, that is not the case. The commission belongs to the listing agent and it belongs to the brokerage. And there is an agreement of cooperation compensation that is offered if there is an agent that is cooperating, that brings a buyer's agent to that transaction. But if there is no buyer's agent, like, that money doesn't just go somewhere else. It belongs to, it stays to. And so often it's a situation of educating. And so words to say, the commission is, if this is the buyer that you're talking to, the commission is between the seller and their brokerage. If there is no buyer's agent, the brokerage receives the full commission. The co-op commission only exists if there is a buyer's agent. Educating them on this process so that they understand. Second thing is, if this is someone who is unrepresented on your listing, is letting them know, because often, as a listing agent, I've got this many times, I don't have an agent, I don't have a buyer's agent. So therefore, my offer is going to be, X% off the price, or I'm going to ask for that back. Well, okay, the commission is between our seller and our brokerage. It does not belong to the buyer. And so, happy as an unrepresented buyer, which is something we can do in my state, know what the laws are in your state, talk to your broker if necessary. I'm happy to submit whatever your offer is. But the commission is not something for me to discuss with you, because it doesn't belong to the buyer. It's not a conversation even for the buyer. So this can be a difficult one, but often it's just an education problem. Next one, another scenario for you is the buyer wants a home that doesn't exist. I think there's a funny meme or something that I've seen, where someone says, I'm looking for this, and this for $250,000, and the agent on the phone says, yeah, those all sold back in 1962 or something like that. Like sometimes people just want things that they just don't exist. Again, it's back to education. We have to, unfortunately, educate them and prove to them that what they want just doesn't exist. So whether it's that it doesn't exist in their budget, or for whatever their budget is, they just can't get all the things that they want, or at least not in the area that they're looking for, or what they want, that style of home just doesn't even exist in this particular area that they're looking in. So it boils down to education. And so the best way to handle this, again, is more with action that you're doing versus words to say, but demonstrating to them, showing them both on paper, and maybe even you take them out and you show them a house or two of really, here's what does exist. Okay, for example, your budget is $400,000. Here's what $400,000 buys in this area, so that they can see how it compares. And by the way, these are the things that you said that you wanted. These homes meet that criteria, but these are priced at $500,000. Like you have to show the differences, and that can usually be enough to be eye-opening, to help that buyer to adjust their expectations. And maybe they need to consider a neighboring area in order to get what they want. I mean, in my area, we have a couple of neighboring counties and a couple of neighboring states where you can go. Yes, you're going to have a little bit of a longer commute, but you can often get what you can't find right here for the better budget, or you can get what you want because that style of home exists. And so maybe you need to think about expanding and expanding their minds and expanding the area within which they're looking in, which may mean you have to refer it out to someone, but it's going to mean that that buyer is going to get what they want, and they're going to be well taken care of. Next question. This is a common one that I've gotten in a conversation I've had a lot as a listing agent, which is, will you reduce your commission? And my answer is no. And that's it. You know, we talk ourselves out of it all the time. And so, you know, that is kind of a fun, you know, like little flip answer. I have used that many times on an appointment. Will you reduce your commission? No. And then I go into more detail about the services that I offer. You know, some people, they really just ask just to ask. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been on a listing appointment and the seller has said, will you reduce your commission, or will you do it for X, when I've shared with them what I'll do. And I've said, no, I don't. And they've said, okay, I just had to ask. I had to ask. I mean, how many times, and that's it. And that's the end of the conversation. They're not asking me because they are dead set on only paying that much. They're just curious. They just want to know, well, am I willing to do it for less? And so, so don't, I think we mess with our minds more than anything else over commission when it comes to listing appointments, because we go in a lot of times worried that, you know, there is so much competition, and, you know, they must be talking to somebody else, and they're, you know, somebody else must have offered them less, and, well, maybe they're talking to these people, and, you know, and then we work ourselves up to the point that we kind of almost talk ourselves out of our own commission and what we feel is appropriate for us. So know that it may not be a deal breaker that they're asking you. They're just asking. If they persist, or if that conversation continues, ask questions so that you can, again, ask questions, listen to understand, why is it that they feel the need to pay less commission? You know, what is really at the heart of that question or that need? Is it because they are worried about what the net's going to be, and they're worried that they're not going to have enough to cover their expenses? Well, you can do a seller's estimated cost of settlement, which hopefully you do as part of your listing presentation, to demonstrate to them how much they're going to walk away with. Is it that they are talking to other people who are offering less? You need to really kind of get to the heart of that and understand what that is. You know, some words to say are, you know, do you see the value in the services that I offer? Do you see how my marketing strategy can net you the highest price in the least amount of time? You know, get their agreement on, okay, you see, these are all the things that I shared with you that I offer. Do you understand that these are really valuable? Which of these would you take away? Like, what would we take away in order to reduce the commission? I would never recommend taking any of these away, which is why my commission is where it is. So those are some of my favorites. And then kind of along those same lines, but such and such company will list it for X. My very favorite script that I use all the time, words to say, when it comes to someone who is trying to compare you with a company, or is saying so-and-so will do it for less, or this company will do it less, is, what is more important to you? Is it paying the least amount or the lowest amount of commission possible, or is it netting the highest sales price? In my experience, the two are mutually exclusive. Other things to say. A discounted commission becomes very expensive when it means discounted services and lackluster marketing. This is where having those stories that you can, you know, fill in with some of those stories, these real life examples. So then maybe I would go into something like, you know, I was just talking to one of my colleagues today, and as crazy as our market is, she had a former client who went and listed with such and such company because the commission was so low. And you know what? They had 30 showings and no offers, and they're terminating their agreement, and they're coming back to work with us. So anytime you can, and that's a real life story that just happened. So anytime you can, you know, kind of add a story to support what you're sharing. Another story that I like to, or words to say that I like to use in this scenario is, you know what? If you think about it, your home is a product to sell. And do you want to sell it on the shelves of Nordstrom or on the shelves at Walmart? Which one will command the audience to sell it at the highest price? You know, if you think about it, Nordstrom and Walmart, and you could do lots of different examples, you know, like grocery stores. You could have like, my area would be like Wegmans or Safeway. They all sell basically the same things, right? Nordstrom and Walmart, they all sell housewares, they all sell clothing, they all sell makeup, but the quality is often different depending on which retailer it is, and the prices that are demanded for the same very similar items is dramatically different. And it's the same thing when you have these types of companies and the differences in marketing. So these are some great ones that I've used over the years that can be really helpful in supporting you. Okay, next question, or next, not really a question, but kind of a phrase that a buyer might say to you is, well, you know what, we need to sleep on it. You've shown them in the house, you found a unicorn. It checks every box that they have for what they're looking for in their next home. It's in the right price range, it's in the right neighborhood, it has all the things that they want. And then they say, we need to sleep on it. So here's your response. You may want to sleep on it tonight, but what about the buyer that saw it yesterday and slept on it last night? While you're sleeping, they're submitting their offer and you may never get the chance. A backup to this, and again, we're talking about education, we're talking about asking questions coming from a place of curiosity, is I have always, one of my things that I've always done, whether I am meeting with a buyer or I'm meeting with a seller, is I spend time as I'm going through and explaining the contract, I'm going through explaining the listing agreement, is I explain very, very clearly how they can get out of it. Because I never want them to feel, a lot of times when they feel like they have the need to sleep on it, it's because they're afraid they're going to make the wrong decision. They're afraid that they're going to get into it and they're going to wish that they hadn't, and they're going to be locked in. So I want to explain very clearly, here's how you can get out of it. I'm not holding you to anything. I'm not pushing you to anything. I'm going to represent you and what works for you, what's right for you and your family. Here's the outs. Here's how you can get out of the contract. Here's when, here's how. And that often is enough for them to help them to feel comfortable in moving forward. And then we'll kind of end with one of my favorites that we hear a lot. And you can substitute Zillow for a lot of different kind of online platforms. There's a lot of different online platforms and websites these days that give property valuations. And so, you're on your listing appointment and you say, you present all your data, here's what your home is worth. And they say, but Zillow says my home is worth whatever. Generally more, sometimes more than what you think it's worth or what you suggested. So my words to say is, well, when is the last time that the folks from Zillow came out to look at your home? Pause, remember, don't try to fill the air. Like, let them think and realize, oh, nobody from Zillow has actually ever come out to look at my home. Yes, because you know what, Zillow is a great tool, but their valuations are based on a computer algorithm, meaning that it isn't taking into account all of the factors that a buyer, and more importantly, that an appraiser are going to be considering when it comes to valuing your property. So that's why this data that I presented to you today is more accurate. And so that's usually sufficient to kind of take care of that concern or that issue. So I hope that all of this has been really helpful for you. I had a lot of fun actually putting together these questions. These are some of the more popular kind of questions that I've gotten, certainly ones that have been submitted through our group, things that I've experienced in my career over the years. I will also share, if you want more or if you want to continue working with me, then you can absolutely do that through our Empower coaching program. It is a very unique monthly membership coaching program. It is only $59 a month with no commitments and no contracts. You can cancel at any time with no hard feelings. And there is so much that we provide that really gives you, almost a plug and play type situation for staying in touch with your clients and building your business in a real authentic way. And I would love to share more with you about that. And you can do that through our website, which is empoweringwomeninrealestate.com, and you can click on coaching. Thank you so much.